First animal welfare leadership roundup call of 2022. We're going to give everybody just about a minute to hop on. A lot of folks joined in that first minute, so we're going to wait just a moment to get started. But if you are new here and you haven't introduced yourself, now is the time. So tell us who you are and what organization you're with.
Sorry, I look crazy today. My name is Sophie. It's my first time here. I'm the manager, the shelter director over at Humane Society of Walden.
Hi, my name is Kim Isley. I'm president of the Animal League of Green Valley.
Good morning, I'm Elizabeth Thompson. I'm in Florence, Oregon. I'm the director at Oregon Coast Humane Society.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandy Mercado. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens for Animal Protection in Houston, Texas.
This is awesome. There's so many new folks here. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kristen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Claudia LeBay. I'm chairman of the board for Your Humane Society SPCA in Central Florida. And we are celebrating our 40th year this year. And it is going to be with a lot of growing pains, it seems, in the crazy world we're in right now. So with lots of changes. But I'd also like to introduce who is joining us, who just joined us a few days before Christmas, is our new shelter director, Morgan Gish, who is somewhere in this call as well.
Great. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. If you are new here, or maybe it's been a while, my name is Kristen Hassan. I'm the director of American Pets Alive and the Human Animal Support Services Project. And here also with Bobby Mann. Bobby, do you want to let everybody know
Of course, Kristen. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. I was just telling folks before we jumped on this call, definitely a much needed break, but every day we were away, we missed being with this community. So super excited to be back to kick off the year. My name is Bobby Mann. I'm the Maddie's Human Animal Support Services Pilot Director, helping with the HOS project under Kristen's leadership, and just really excited to be with all of you today.
Thanks so much. We're so happy you're here. These calls happen every Friday except on holidays. If you have registered, you only need to register the one time. And it's a lot of us. So if you haven't been to a call before, we like to have as many people as possible get to talk. Please stay muted if you are not talking. And if you are willing to have your camera on, it's so much more fun to share when we get to see people's faces. And if you can't have your camera on, that doesn't mean you shouldn't come. Plenty of people just call and listen in while they're doing everything from spay-neuter surgeries to driving around responding to field services calls. So it's fine to do either. And we love to see when these calls are all about this group coming together, having challenging, interesting conversations, supporting each other, and just moving this this thing we called animal welfare forward in one of the most challenging times, and for many of us, the most challenging time in our history. So before we get started into our agenda today, I want to turn it over to Mary Smith from Maddie's Fund.
Happy New Year, everyone. It's really great to see all of these people back again. You know, it's kind of amazing to me. About 15 minutes ago, I was one of 3 people on the call, and now here we are with 151 of us all together. And that's pretty incredible. So for as much as I hate Zoom, I really love the fact that we can be pretty instantaneous about our connections. And I think that's a good thing. So I was trying to think of like, what did I learn about 2021? But to be honest with you, the best thing that I could come up with is sort of like, as I approach 2022, I'm kind of like that suspicious girlfriend, the one that knows that you've been cheating, can't really prove it, but suspects that something is going on. So my approach to 2022 is kind of at a distance of maybe 20 or 30 feet as I figure out, are you going to be a good one? Are you going to be a bad one? What is it going to be? How is it going to work? What is it that you will deliver? And will we be able to get through it? So I am very skeptical about the coming year. Little bit of hope, mostly pretty skeptical. But I have something sort of fun to share with you. that one of the things that Maddie's Fund used to do when we used to go to conferences in person is we used to do grant giveaways. And we had slot machines and games and all sorts of things. The whole idea behind that was just to show you that grant giving is really not a scary thing, not a mysterious thing. It really can be a very accessible opportunity. So one of the things that we wanted to do with this call is every month we're going to give away $5,000. Now, it might be one $5,000 grant, it might be five $1,000 grants, it might be two $2,500 grants, but it's going to be completely randomized. All you have to do is come to these calls, register for the calls. Your name will then be put into, I guess, a super giant hat that Allison must have someplace. And then we will select a winner at the end of the month. And we'll do this and just see how it goes. We'd like to see more people come to these calls. We're hoping that this might entice more people to come, because one of the things that I have really come to rely on over the past, and Kristen, you didn't ask, but this is the 23rd month of COVID. So is that the value of connections and being together. Last year, I had an opportunity to talk with a couple executive directors who have formed sort of a little social pod group where they meet on a regular basis. They talk about work things, but they also talk about social things. And I realized that these were probably 4 or 5 of the healthiest women I had ever encountered, because of the connections that they made and because they were willing to work on those relationships. So I would encourage you, as you are part of these calls, to seek out others to connect with, to just talk about what's going on. Before the call started, 2 women, it was Janice and I think Tammy, were talking about how they were dealing with the snow and what was going on. And it was such a lovely, charming little conversation that I didn't want to interrupt, and I was glad to be able to eavesdrop on it. I think we need to do more of that. I think what we have demonstrated is we cannot do this alone. And the world that we know it is going to continue to be affected by the viruses that we are encountering, whether it's COVID or Omicron or some other variant that's out there. And so trying to think about what life will be when it's normal, I think is a lost cause. I think this is normal, and we just have to figure out how do we get through it. And how do we get through it when we really want to have those human connections, and it's really not always appropriate to do that or safe to do that. And so as we think about what we want to do going forward, we should acknowledge the fact that COVID is the boyfriend who cheats on us. We should keep them at bay and figure out how we can keep our teams, our families, our friends, our colleagues, and most of our community safe and healthy with the work that we do. So thank you. Happy New Year.
Thanks so much, Mary. Shelley, do you want to give kind of I'm seeing in the chat people register for this separately. Do you want to just share a little bit about that?
Sure, no problem. So Allison shared the links to register for the Monday and Friday calls, which is your registration to actually come and attend here. She also shared another link, which is to sign up for the giveaway. So there are 2 separate registrations. The giveaways are on a monthly basis. And so you'll register anytime that you attend a call, and we'll reset that on a monthly basis. If you attend 4 calls in a month, you can register 4 times for more chances to win. If you watch on demand, you can also register. There'll be a link to register along with in the Maddie's Pet Forum. There'll be a link where the actual on-demand recording is. There'll be a link to register. So anyone who attends a call this month and anyone who watches a call this month you can register to win. So that's sort of the lowdown. And whoever wins, you can designate whichever organization you want to receive the funds. So if you're a national org, like Lindsay asked, you're welcome to designate another organization to receive the funds.
Thank you so much. This is really exciting. And the more the merrier when it comes to this call. So we're excited to see lots more folks joining the calls. So over break, we received a lot of information that shelters were struggling, and curious if any of you, you can give us a little reaction button like this. If you were Omicron, if you fell to the Omicron variant over the last few weeks, like the millions and millions of other folks who did. So, or you can let us know in the chat. Yeah, Casey, you had it. So a lot of folks have been sick. A lot of you have experienced short staffing, and the holidays were really difficult. I just put the link to a blog in the chat about what shelters are going through. We collected all the data we could over the break about what was happening in shelters and tried to put it into a public facing blog, and also trying to get it out to some national media outlets, just so that the public understands the challenges right now, and that, like hospitals and schools, we are not immune to the staffing issues COVID is causing. And the good news about all of that, though, is that in South Africa, the Omicron variant moved through very rapidly. And the impacts were relatively short-lived. So things in 6 to 8 weeks may look much, much brighter than they do now, but we do know folks are really struggling right now. And so you can help by getting the word out so that as many non-animal welfare people as possible know and can show us a little grace in this moment, and maybe even help foster, adopt, or keep an animal out of the shelter. We're going to move now to any of our national organization partners who are on the call. This is the time to hear from you. Any updates, information you have to share with the group, go ahead and just jump in.
I'll jump in to follow Mary's update, talking about community and building community and finding like-minded people. The Human Animal Support Services Project launched Java-Likes, which is basically small networking groups doing the same work that you or your staff are doing. The marketing Java-Like launched this week on our HOSNet page, and I'll share the link in the chat in just a second, but we have 6 Java-Likes that have launched and meet monthly or every other week here. And so share those with your staff to register. And again, I'll share the link. They're really great meetings that have a lot of momentum and a lot of energy, and you can meet like-minded folks.
The purpose of the Java-Likes is so that people doing similar jobs can just have a support system. And we know this is a desperate need right now. And don't be afraid to send folks. This is for all levels of staff, whether they started in animal welfare 3 weeks ago or 30 years ago. It's really intended to bring people who do similar work together to help each other solve problems. And so they're different than any of the working groups in that they're really peer-led and peer support groups.
Stacy's here with Community Cats Podcast. Just wanted to do a shout out. We have our Trapper Certification Workshop tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. That's our monthly workshop that we do. So for the new groups that are out there and might not know, I do a monthly training session, Trapper Certification Workshops. It's a small fee, $10 fee. You get a certificate TNR test, and you get folks in your regional trained in understanding how not to have their car smell like pee for the rest of their lives. So it's really valuable just from that standpoint. Also a shout out, thanks to Maddie for being a lead premier sponsor for the online cat conference, which is coming at the end of the month. So if you're interested in finding out more about that and the other programs at the Community Cats Podcast, just go to communitycatspodcast.com and we've got everything there. Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's Kathy from Canada. Happy New Year to everyone. Just a quick reminder that we have the Humane Canada Summit for Animals coming in May of this year, and it's going to be a hybrid event, so you can register and attend virtually, and or if we're lucky, some in-person days in the middle of May. So I'll drop the link in the chat and hope to see many or all of you there.
Hi, everybody. It's Valerie from the Association for Animal Welfare Advancement. Just real quick, I want to invite everybody to our first webinar of the year, which is Wednesday, January 19th. It will be featuring two of the great minds behind Wild Leaders, who some of you know. They will be talking about whole and intentional leader development, and they'll be giving a teaser of a new certificate program in leadership development that we're offering. I'll put the link in the chat. Hope I see you there. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jerica from NACA. I wanted to jump on and first wish everybody a happy new year. I hope you're doing well. I wanted to share real quickly that in the last 2 weeks, NACA released 2 statements. I'll put the link in the chat after so you can access it. But one of them is focused on appointment-based intake into shelters. It shares some of the consequences of the on-demand style of intake, and then we move into some things that you can do to help move towards appointment-based intake. We have received feedback, both with some questions and lots of positive feedback. So what we're going to do is we're going to host an open town hall on the 18th. So to really help to talk more about it, to answer questions. So I'll be posting that as well. We're asking that people come if they want to talk and have questions. So it'll just be an open town hall. And then the second statement was a piece that focused really on what everyone here has touched on, which is just this unprecedented time that we're experiencing. Goes into some ideas and suggestions for things that you can do with your organization to really help you through these tough times. So again, I'll put the link in the chat. I hope everybody's well. I want to also comment one last thing on the Job Alikes that Jamie mentioned. The field services one is going to be amazing. So I hope that we see you all there. We've got a really great lineup for the next, I think, 6 months already planned. So it's going to be fabulous. That's it. Have a good day.
Hello, everyone. This is Allie from Good Pup. I also wanted to jump on to announce our first webinar of the year coming up on January 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic is going to be enrichment, keeping our dogs happy and preventing potential problems. This webinar is free and open to all staff, volunteers, and foster parents in any shelter or rescue group. And we also have recordings of previous webinars on our website, which I will post in the chat. And for those of you who don't know, Good Pup is a positive reinforcement dog training company that works with shelters and rescues. So I'll post our website in the chat, and we'd love for you to check us out. And please attend our webinar and spread the word. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, everyone. We want to turn now to our agenda for the day, and we have 3 topics we're covering today. One, the folks at Petco Love are going to come and talk about their 2022 plans, and I think this is the first time anybody's gotten to hear, so it's really exciting. Followed by Janice Bradley, who is here to talk about a new paper that came out about just how weird or not weird shelter dogs really are. As an unabashed fangirl of both Janice and Dr. Gary Petronic, I cannot wait to hear about this. And then we'll conclude by talking about a toolkit that recently came out as a collaboration between Haas and Heartspeak. Caitlin Quinn is here to talk about a toolkit that you're all going to want to see, because we think it's going to save you a lot of time and energy and help you communicate more effectively to your public this year when it matters the most. So that's what we're covering today. So let's jump right into it with Petco Love.
Well, thanks. Let me get the PowerPoint up real quick. All right. All right. Can we see?
Yeah, I think we can.
Looks great.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. So I want to introduce myself. So my name is Joanna Randazzo, and I'm the manager of grants administration with Petco Love. And I'm joined by Roxanne Ramirez, our life-saving program specialist. And we're really excited to talk to you all today about our national vaccine campaign, which is coming up in March. Just to note, we won't have time to answer questions on this call, but we will be posting the links to information shared in the chat and providing our email to reach out to us. And the recording is also available in Maddie's Pet Forum. So you'll have that information with, to share within your organization or with others that you think would be a good fit for the campaign. As many of you know, in August, we made the commitment of donating 1 million vaccines to help stop the spread of vaccine preventable illness. And now we are ramping things up by declaring March National Pet Vaccination Month, and we need your help. We would like to invite all of you to join our national efforts to raise awareness of the importance of vaccination and make vaccines accessible to all pets during National Pet Vaccination Month and beyond. So this is, you can see an overview of our progress to date. We started with a select invitation to our organization partners, and thus far, close to 300 organizations pictured have administered over 300,000 vaccines. So we're about a third of the way through to our goal of 1 million, which is where your organizations come into it with our March campaign. So Roxanne, take it away.
Okay, so I'm going to go over some details of the campaign. So how to participate. We encourage organizations that have the capacity to do so to host free vaccine clinics this March or throughout the month of March, right? Since this is a national campaign, we do provide you with all the marketing assets. So once you fill and get approved, that approval email has a bunch of information, and within that is a toolkit, and it covers social media posts, PR templates, anything and everything, and it's customizable. So you can put in your organization's logo and all of that information. So we've had some with the kind of like our test group that we had some creative ideas. Some organizations are doing drive-through clinics. They're setting up in their parking lots. We had one that was really cool. It was during Halloween time, and the organization worked with their local McDonald's and threw kind of like a party. And the kids came in with their pets. The pets got a vaccination. The kids got free Happy Meals. So you can be creative. You know what your community is going to respond to, right? So we totally embrace the creativity. So who can receive these vaccines? So the vaccines must be administered to family pets for free. And for clarity speaking, I'm going to use this term of owned pets, just so we're very straightforward. This program is not for shelter or foster pets. And the vaccines we're offering through this initiative are your basic parvo distemper Panluc, so canine DA PPV, and feline HCP. So those are the 2 vaccines we're offering. Order quantities per week, just real quick, you to order every week. This is just an option should you need it. We do have a minimum and a maximum. So minimum order is 300 vaccines, maximum is 1,000. This is a total vaccine, so not 300 of each, just a 300 total is that minimum. And then along with the free vaccines, your organization will also receive a $3 stipend for the administered vaccines. And when you apply, we are going to attach kind of like a follow-up report to your grant. And so upon the completion of that follow-up report, we ask, how many vaccines did you order? How many were administered? Kind of some information questions of if you ran into any challenges, anything like that. Once we receive that, that kind of generates the process of getting your stipend out to you. So next steps, and Joanna's going to throw all of this into the chat. You're going to get it. Don't worry about, I know there's links in here and you're not going to be able to click on them, but you're going to get that. So the next steps are, the main one is register for National Pet Vaccination Month. If you're committed to this and you're ready to do it, sign up today. Get in there. We ask some questions about, organization info, of course, some public facing information. We are going to create a website to kind of summarize where these vaccine clinics are going to be so the community can go to that website and see, oh, there's a clinic down the street, my vaccinations, I'm going, right? So we are asking for that public or we may have to ship out sooner so you can stock up or put it into 2 shipments. So we do look at those registration forms and kind of see who we need to reach out to. But once you register, our team's going to look at that. You are going to get an email correspondence about what your next step specifically for your organization. And I'm kind of jumping ahead of those 2 bullets that are on there. But if your organization is not familiar with Petco Love and you haven't been to our partner portal, you will need to register. So within that portal is everything grants related. So any opportunities we have that your organization may be applying for is going to be hosted in our partner portal. So like I said, the link's going to be there. Get in there, register, just get that out of the way, right? And then we do require an annual data report for those organizations that perform adoptions. We'll give you the instructions and step-by-step guide. All of that will help you out through that process. So we highly suggest you attend our 2021 partnership webinar, and that's later this month on January 19th. That's where we go through all the details of everything we're offering through the year, any programs, grants, adoptions, any of that, we go through that. But if you can't attend, we do record it and we post it in the partner portal. So that's the importance of signing up for that partner portal. So you can see that webinar after it's happened. You can review it at your own time, share it with anybody, right? Okay, so that was a lot of information, but one last thing, are you able to host a vaccine clinic now? So we do want to make March a big splash, right? We want to create this huge campaign in March, get everybody participating, create awareness of the importance of vaccinating your pet, right? We all know the importance of that. But if you want to plan a clinic at the end of the month, mid-February, whatever works for your organization, that application is live now. So you can go in there, complete the application. We'll walk you through all the steps. If you need to do something else, can get you set up. We absolutely want you to participate in March. We want you to join that initiative in March, but we're not going to stop you. If you have a clinic that you there for your community, that's the main goal, right? Getting these. So we're not going to stop you. But yeah, we'll put all this information in the chat. Questions? Oh, it says my internet is unstable. If you can't hear me, please let me know.
That's okay. We've got to move on to the next subject
Okay.
anyway. So if people do have immediate questions, they can go ahead and put those in the chat. And thank you all so much. So this is free vaccines. I think the word free is a big one. And these are for owned pets. So thank you, Petco Love. This is really exciting. And minimum of 300 is really cool. That's a lot of animals that can get vaccinated in a community. So is there any last statement you want to say in closing?
I was just gonna, literally my last line was our email and all the questions to that email address. Joanna's gonna put it in the chat, but Happy New Year. Thank y'all for your time.
Kristen, thank you for having us, and Bobby. Happy New Year, y'all. We've missed you guys.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. And thanks to Petco Love for all you do for so many pets and all of our community. So, okay, well, we're going to move on to hearing from Janice Bradley, who is here to talk about this new, really important paper, but I don't think she would disagree. It is a heavy read. There's a lot of information. It took me absorbing it all really took me a couple of times reading pieces of it. And so she's here to kind of distill down, talk a little bit about it. So Janice, welcome to the call. Thanks so much for being here.
You're more than welcome. I was actually taken with the last presentation about vaccination programs, because I'm a dog trainer by trade. At least I taught dog training at the original Maddie Center, when all the way back in the time when Rich Avanzino ran it. And yet my research in this area has convinced me more and more. My research on sheltering and relinquishment has convinced me more and more that we can do more to keep pets in homes, dogs in particular, by providing access to essential services like veterinary care. So that was really an important lead in. This paper is the third in what we think of as a trilogy. It probably ought to have its own little booklet that came about as a result of a lot of rumination and conversations between Dr. Gary Petronic and I over the years. We've been colleagues for a long time at the National Canine Research Council. I'm the director of communications and publications, and he's a consultant for us. And for years before that, I had been talking with Dr. Amy Marder about her research on the value of behavior evaluations with shelter dogs. And this was something that she had devoted really 20 years of her career to, and had become more and more skeptical about. And this culminated in some research that actually showed the takeaways from her research, and it's readily accessible, were that the results were not very, really lacked validity. You couldn't take them to the bank very well. And the remarkable finding that gradually emerged over the years with her was that the owners didn't care whether their dogs were resource guarders or not. So just sit with that one for a minute. When they did actual follow-up with adopters on dogs who had been diagnosed as resource guarders in the shelter, or when you ask them, did they care if they were adopting a dog who'd been diagnosed with that? The answer from the adopters was a resounding no. This made a huge impression on me and on Gary. And the other thing that we knew going in was that there had been some wide-ranging literature reviews. Those are papers that just that look at all the literature on a topic, or the predominant literature on the topic, and make some generalizations about whether there's some consensus. And the two major lit reviews that had been done on behavior evaluations rated the validity of behavior evaluations as really not as quite poor. Not very good, and often resulting in false positives, which is obviously problematic. False negatives are problematic too, but depending on sort of where your interests are, one can be more troublesome than the other. So we were trying to figure out how, since the lit reviews already existed, we were trying to figure out how to approach this, to kind of introduce this topic to the community. And Gary came up with one of his kind of back of the envelope calculations, because he's an epidemiologist, and said, well, what if we took the assumption that there was a reliable, well-validated instrument, a behavior evaluation? What then if there were actually a good one that was good by the standards of human diagnostic testing, which are pretty high? Said, what if there were a really good one? What would the results actually be for shelter dogs? So we did those calculations based on a hypothetical test that has never, and to my mind probably never will exist. This, much better than what's out there, and found that even with that, since the actual occurrence of the issues of concern, and at that time, and I think still pretty much the focus of behavior evaluations for dogs in shelters in particular was on concerns about aggression. What we found was that even with a really good test, the results would be no better than flipping a coin. You'd have lots and lots of dogs that tested as having behavior issues, and then they got in the home and they were absolutely fine. So that was the first paper, which is called No Better Than Flipping a Coin. Gary's very good at titles. Which got quite good play. But then even after that came out, and there was a lot of response, a lot of people read it or said they had read it. It may be, in some ways, it may be the most difficult read of the three. The reason that I say that is when the reviewers, when the first peer reviews came back, the statistician among the peer reviewers said, no, you have to have cartoons, nobody will understand this. So we put in cartoons to explain the statistics. But even after that, we continue to hear people talking and references in the literature to talking about tests as behavior evaluations for shelter dogs as validated. Using that term, saying, this test has been demonstrated to be reliable, this test has been demonstrated to be valid, and we knew this wasn't so. We knew there wasn't anything that reached, a very, very high level of validity or reliability. We said, okay, so maybe something more is needed. And we collected all the papers that had attempted to do validation and reliability analysis of various behavior evaluations and rated them according to the ways that that diagnostic testing is usually evaluated. And oddly now, one of the strange things that's happened because we've been living in a COVID world for 2 years now is some of the terminology for validating diagnostic tests is actually kind of in the common domain now. I can talk about some of this stuff and people don't look at me as if I had two heads or as if I were, you know, talking some foreign language, because we hear these terms thrown around having to do with COVID tests. So that was the second paper, and it was unimaginatively titled as a prequel to the first paper, as we came back, you know, to a previous question. And unsurprisingly to us, none of the existing tests came out very well according to the ways that you're supposed to evaluate diagnostic tests. Okay, so that was out there. And finally, we decided to look at really the bigger question, to step back from that question and see if we could produce something that would talk about why we're doing these behavior evaluations in the first place, and whether or not that the reasons that we're giving for that are really hold up, not even in the light of how good they are, but in the light of why we're doing them in the first place. And one of the reasons that's often put forward to justify doing, you know, structured behavior evaluations for dogs in shelters is that we hope through doing this we can intervene in ways that will prevent relinquishment, and if the dog is already in the shelter, prevent returns, prevent what we call, you know, failed adoptions, which is another whole question. And we decided to look at that question in particular. It was something that Gary knew a whole lot about and had been involved in the major studies of since the 1990s. So we thought we'd take a look at that. And that's what this paper is about. It's really about what the relationship is and whether there is a demonstrated relationship in the literature about whether there's a strong tie between dogs getting relinquished to shelters and what we came to call behavioral incompatibilities, meaning the dog expresses some behavior that the owner feels is incompatible with, is threatening to their idea of what a good relationship is with the dog. Okay, we came to that because we were both really dissatisfied with the term behavior problems. And my dissatisfaction with that goes all the way back to listening to Ian Dunbar say, you know, there's no such thing as a behavior problem. What there is the owner has a problem with the behavior. The dog doesn't have a behavior problem. And Gary has concerns about over pathologizing any behavior, particularly a behavior that exists on a continuum. So you've got normal at one end, normal, you know, and then on a continuum, you may get to a behavior that you can no longer call normal. And I should insert the caveat here that we were never trying to challenge the idea that there are some dogs who find their way into shelters who would have great difficulty in living, you know, happily or even safely in a human family. We weren't looking at that. We weren't trying to ask that question whether that exists. I mean, my personal opinion is that of course they exist. Of course there are dogs that simply cannot get along with people, and even for whom there might be no intervention that would allow them to get along with people. My experience in sheltering, which was primarily at that original Maddie Center, also told me, and again, I cannot support this in the literature. No one has looked at it. Somebody needs to. But my own personal opinion about that is that everybody in the shelter knows who those dogs are. Okay, they're the ones whose kennels nobody will go into. Okay, and you don't need a behavior evaluation. You can see in day-to-day interactions with dogs, the ones who are going to have great difficulty getting along with human beings. But again, that's not a scientific finding. It's only an experiential it's only an experiential statement based on working with training a couple thousand dogs in shelters. So but something that would be worth investigating. So in looking at this, what we did was we found 12 papers that had collected reasons that people reported when they were relinquishing dogs that we could analyze for this. And we found another 6 papers that looked at reasons that studied reasons that people gave when they were returning dogs who they adopted and were returning after a relatively short time. Gary worked on one study on this with a couple of thousand dogs actually working on records of returns, and those were after 30 days. But the 6 papers varied in how long the dogs had been in homes. The first finding the first thing that we found in looking at these papers and analyzing what the researchers had done was really a big surprise, because we found that among these 18 papers, there were only 2 that could be called risk analysis studies. Okay, and so you need to know what a risk analysis has to do. It's not enough just to count something. So in other words, if you just count how many of the people returning a dog or relinquishing a dog say that the dog chewed up their stuff, it doesn't matter. And this is a hugely important conceptually. It doesn't matter how many report that if that's the only information you have. It could be 80%, and which it never is, but it could be 80%, and it still doesn't mean anything. Okay, and that's what all but 2 of the papers were. And one of the 2 risk analysis, Gary had actually been the first author on, so he was really distressed, and the other one had been done in the 1970s. Okay, the reason that it doesn't tell you anything is that you don't know what the proportion of dogs is who are living successfully in homes that express the same behavior. If it's the same, it's not a risk factor by definition, because it's just something that dogs do. It doesn't carry any elevated risk. If more of the dogs being relinquished tear up their people's stuff, then you start looking at it as a risk factor, depending on how big the difference is. If more of the dogs that are living in homes tear up their people's stuff, you can hypothesize, and you can make a fairly good case for it as being protective. It's better if dogs tear up their people's stuff. You don't know based on just the collation of reasons. You cannot know. Okay, and it's a common misconception that people think that you can just count something and say, oh gee, a whole lot of dogs that are relinquished do this, and so it must be a risk factor. No, it doesn't mean anything. So this was the biggest finding. And remember, I came originally back in the day from a dog training background, where one of the kind of sacred part of the sacred belief system is that what are called behavior problems are a huge, risk factor for dogs being at risk of losing their homes. Well, maybe not. It certainly seems that way to a dog trainer, because of course all the dogs that you deal with are in homes where their owners are at least complaining about the expression of a particular behavior, even if they're not contemplating rehoming the dog. So that's what you hear about, and it carries a pretty predictable bias. So there were only two of these, one from the 1970s, one from the 1990s. Everything else was a compilation of reasons that people were asked. And something that made us pretty uncomfortable about a lot of these studies was that there was a tendency to lump everything behavioral into one category, as if soiling in the house were the same as biting the kids. They clumped everything into one big category. But if they were comparing that with non-behavioral reasons, they would often, and not every study, but they would often then split up other categories like economic issues. So you might be comparing the landlord raised the rent or person lost his job by itself against everything behavioral, which is likely to give you a skewed result on the effect of behavioral reasons. This is important because obviously, even if you know that a particular behavior is likely to be a problem in the next home, if it were a problem in the last home, which we don't know, by the way, but even if we knew that, our interventions are not going to be the same if we're trying to figure out what to do with the dog who's not house trained, as opposed to how we're going to intervene with a dog that doesn't like kids and may bite them. Very, very, very different things. Not terribly useful to clump them together.
Janice, can I stop you for just 1 second?
Absolutely.
People start to have to drop off in the last 10 minutes. So I want to make sure there's a couple of critical questions that we just want to make sure to get to, because we all, I think at this point in animal welfare, many of us are like, yep, we get it. You're right. What do we do? And so I want to turn to Dr. Sagerson, who has a particular question that I think is really relevant to this group. So Dr. Sagerson, do you want to jump in here?
Oh, hi, Sheila.
Hey, Janice, good to see you. Thank you so much for publishing this paper. My biggest question from this paper, I felt like it had so much valuable information in it, but what do shelters take from this? The lumping is not good. So do we be more specific, but then not ask for up to 5 reasons? What are your recommendations for what shelters should do with regard to intake?
Oh, and with regard to trying to figure out what happened in the previous home.
Well, not necessarily that, but more so recognizing that this lumping is a challenge, but shelters do still want to be tracking those animals that are coming in for behavior when it happens. And so how do you recommend shelters do that? Do you recommend changing to everything being open-ended so that it's more free-form? How do you recommend that shelters manage the intake process so that they can keep data to really know what's happening?
I would say that reframing the questions and being very specific, having something that you think is telling in each area and using that. In other words, doing intake more like a behavior consultant does. So, and by that I mean, when I was doing behavior consultation, I would never ask people to list behaviors or even check behaviors. I would always frame things according to what does your dog do when? And so what does your dog do when kids approach him? when, you know, whatever the things are that you think are important, and then record those and individualize and have some and have some priorities. And I think it would, in terms of collecting research, it would be very, very helpful for a researcher to know how the person prioritized those things. So in other words, it's not terribly helpful to know if you're talking about, you know, trying to get information in the aggregate about a population. It's not terribly helpful to know that, yes, my dog did this, because you don't know whether it's a problem for that person, and you don't know whether it was a make or break thing. So if we're asking people to list particular things, and that's you know, the research purpose is different from how are we going to deal with this dog. That's a completely different question. But for research purposes and saying, you know, what should we be paying attention to in shelters, you've got to have priority. You've got to have the person doing the surrendering prioritize, and you've got to have them tell you what's the make or break. Otherwise, it's extremely difficult to tell what was important. And we looked at studies that ranged from, you can list as many as you want, you can pick as many as you want from this list, you can only pick one, you can only say one. How do you compare those? How do you know what they really mean? So you need an instrument that allows you to do that if what you want to know about is your population. If what you want to know about is, how do I help this particular dog be successful later on, then you need to know then you need to act like a behavior consultant. And those are two really different things. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. And it sounds like you're saying it's very similar to the ideal dog studies, where if you ask someone what their ideal dog is, and the dog they want, it's a perfect dog, but that dog usually doesn't exist. So it's really about narrowing it down to what's really, really important, or what the real most important reasons are. Thank you.
And nothing that I've read convinces me that anybody really cares. There are very many people who actually require a perfect dog.
Yeah.
We like the biggest thing that we have in common as a species with Canis familiaris is that we are all love the one you live species. I mean, love the one you're with species. That's who we are. That's who we are, and that's who they are.
So the paper kind of concludes by saying maybe the best approach is this, like, don't sweat the small stuff approach. And it isn't really stated blatantly, but then is the goal to decrease the amount of investment in these kind of minor, more routine behavioral challenges dogs may enter with, so that one can focus on the more serious behaviors. All of us deal with cases pretty routinely where there are actual known histories of issues that may pose, more than it being about the dog, but may pose a higher risk. Is that sort of the direction you'd like to see shelters go?
Yes, but even more than that, we'd really like to see shelters go in the direction of not delaying or limiting adoptions for the vast majority of dogs who come in, who are going to be basically successful in homes. A few are going to come back, and there will certainly, you'll get dogs in with bite histories, you know, or you know, I mean, really serious things in their history that could cause them to you know, present a risk, or dogs that are so fearful that they're pancake dogs and need, you know, and need some kind of help with that, perhaps in the form of an extremely skilled foster. Those are different, but they're screamingly obvious. They're obvious in histories, and they're obvious as soon as you start interacting with them. You don't need to to submit every dog who walks through the door, who is just a member, as far as you know, who is just an ordinary member of the general pet dog population, to a battery test that is unlikely to give you an accurate result.
Does that go for stray? There's a question in the chat about strays where there is no background information. Would you say the same rules apply whether the dog is stray or coming in with a?
Yeah. I mean, if you have the luxury of having a history, and you have the personnel and the resources to get a good detailed history, then that's going to give you a lot of information. But you're going to see what the dog is like in the shelter. And one of the wonderful things that's happened astonishingly, I'm sure people are aware of this here, that's generally wonderful through the COVID catastrophe, is the huge move toward fostering and out of bricks and mortar shelters, which means and a foster home is going to be a much better environment for getting a take on what a dog is like in a home. So to the extent that you're doing that, you're going to find out what the dog is like. You can, battery behavior evaluations just aren't going to tell you. You can wish that they would, but they won't. Even daily life in the shelter is better than that. And daily life in a foster home is much better. If you want to know, if you want to know how an animal behaves in a given environment, put them in that environment. Don't put them in another one, or submit them to a battery test, which, when you think about it, is several steps removed from what you're actually trying to find out. It's a situation, it's a context in which the dog is never going to find himself that you're trying to imitate. What are the odds of it being very accurate? I mean, when you tell regular people about what people do in behavior evaluations, they look at you as if you'd lost your mind. You take a rubber hand on a stick and stick it in the dog's face while he's eating his food. Regular people laugh at this.
Mm-hmm. So we have 3 minutes left, and I want to ask sort of the hard question, which is, why are people still doing behavior evaluations despite all the evidence you all have presented? And what is it going to take to stop, to get shelters to act differently? Like, what are we missing? Because these are still happening, and over COVID, I've actually heard they're increasing again. What do we need to do differently to stop this?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Oh. I'm writing papers just as fast as I can. and talking to people about it. I mean, we have our theories about what's behind that. I think fear of liability is a big one, concerns about liability, and also just wanting to, I think it's very common human motivation to do things because it makes you feel like you don't know what to do, but it makes you feel like you're doing something. I think that's a powerful motivator, even if there's no evidence that it accomplishes what you want it to accomplish. And there's certainly pressure in any kind of situation like lawsuits and things. I mean, there's a belief out there that there are valid diagnostic tests that can be done, to demonstrate the so-called, temperament of a dog, because people imagine that, gee, there must be. And when you tell them that there isn't, then they say, okay, well then, what can we do? So it's very, very difficult to take away something that makes people feel more secure, even if it doesn't make them more secure. So that's the most difficult question. I mean, part of my response to that, and part of our response to that, is that doing this is really hard on the dogs, who have done nothing except being between homes at the moment. I mean, that's all a shelter dog is. That's all. Amy Martyr said it better than anybody a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to I'll get the phrasing wrong, but she said a shelter dog is just somebody who at the moment doesn't have a human being to stand by them. And it's the practice of doing battery tests is really hard on shelter dogs. It keeps them in the shelters longer, and it very often limits their adoption possibilities, their adoption options, sometimes to zero for dogs who are just dogs.
Well, I think that brings us up to the very last moment of this. This is really an important conversation. And Janice, thank you so much. We hope you'll come back and continue this conversation with us. We'll make sure to send out links to these papers and the announcements for next week. We have My Dog Always Eats First. The author is Leslie Irvine. She'll be spending the entire hour with us talking about people experiencing homelessness and their dogs. And so it should be another really compelling hour. And thank you so much, Janice. I think we want to go write down a bunch of quotes from things that you shared today and really appreciate you being here.
Can I throw in one suggestion that I forgot to mention? If you want to look somewhere for some interesting suggestions, look at the site for the Battersea Animal Homes in the UK. They do some quite good stuff on observing dog behavior in situ when the dogs are in their shelters. It's without resorting to battery tests.
Okay.
They do some really interesting stuff.
Thank you. Maybe we can send a link out to that. And please join us on the Maddie's Pet Forum. If you are not a forum member, please sign up. This is where we're continuing these conversations. I'm so excited about continuing those there. The forum's different than social media. It's an industry platform where we can have honest, hard conversations about this stuff. So please join the Maddie's Pet Forum. Mary, do you have anything you want to share in closing for this pretty amazing, thank you all speakers, first call of 2022?
Thank you so much, Janice. I think you did a lot to help break down some of those myths and assumptions that we have held on to for so long. And I love it when you show us how what we're standing on is just a cloud. And if we don't learn how to fly, we're going to fall. So let's all practice flying, you guys, and let's not hold those assumptions and myths quite so close. Thanks, Janice. Happy New Year, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you next week.
And we're going to hear from Caitlin Quinn and Casey Spain next week as well. We didn't want to stop the conversation, so we will be following up on that. Caitlin and Casey, thank you for your patience. Janice, it was too important to interrupt. So thank you all. And thanks to so many of the behavior rock stars who have made such a difference for dogs who are on here today. Dr. Sagerson, I see Bernice on here. And so many other folks, Dr. Carly, Amy Sadler, thank you all for everything you do for shelter dogs every day, all of you. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you so much.